Welcome to Ideas in Action, the official University of Southern California podcast. Shows are webcast live on Facebook from Studio 1A in the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism.
Turns out people really want to know if they're going to feel the earthquake, not just if there's going to be damage from the earthquake. And a lot of people expected to get an early warning on that new Los Angeles app, and they didn't for either the magnitude 6.5 or the magnitude 7 the next day. And that's because the warning system has a threshold that's set only to warn you if the intensity is high enough to cause damage. So even though it was magnitude 7, it was only intensity 3, and it was set to warn you if the intensity was 4 or greater. So they've, actually yesterday I got the notice that they've lowered the threshold to where if you feel the earthquake, you should be getting the warning on your phone. Although now we have to work on making sure the warnings come fast enough to give you time to do something.
So the question would be, what do you do at that time? Let's say you do have 30 seconds. What should you do? And certainly, one of the things that come to mind is to get yourself to a safe location. Like I mentioned, getting under a desk or a table, protecting yourself, stopping any kind of hazardous activity. Like if you're working in a laboratory, for example, or doctors might be working and surgeons and stopping the surgery just until get through the earthquake. So the earthquake early warning system could really help us, even if it's just 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, that's right. And 30 seconds would be great for an earthquake in Los Angeles. Up in areas where they have long faults, big faults, faults that are far away that have magnitude 8 and 9 earthquakes, sometimes you can get a minute or two of warning. But here in LA, we'll probably have 5 or 10 seconds when the system is tuned up in a few years. So, but even that is enough to duck, cover, and hold. And I guess, should we tell them what they shouldn't do?
Okay. Well, let's go back to maybe some of the myths that are out there. People often ask, do we still go in a doorway for an earthquake? And the answer is that is not the recommendation. That is something that was recommended quite some time ago. The doorway doesn't afford you any more protection than any other part of the structure that you may be in. It really comes down to that drop, cover, and hold, or the interior wall, or getting between the seats in a lecture hall. There's some other myths out there too about earthquakes.
Well, and you definitely should not run out of the building. I mean, if you're in a strong earthquake, you can't run, for one thing, and for another thing, that's the worst place to be. So you definitely want to stay inside protected rather than run out of the building.
Yeah, the tendency is for people to run outside, but I always say if it's shaking inside, what's going on outside? It's the same thing. You can't outrun the earthquake, so take protection wherever you are and duck and cover. But that kind of leads us to, we know people get hurt by the stuff that falls and moves around. That's usually where our injuries come from. I believe in the Northridge earthquake, there was something around 40,000 injuries reported, many of which were cuts and bruises from people falling over things in their home. It was 4:30 in the morning and getting cuts and scrapes. So there's things you can do now to secure your home to make sure it's safe. One of those things is to take straps. You could actually, I have some examples here of earthquake straps that you could purchase at any hardware store. And you could, like this for example, is for a piece of furniture like dresser drawers, but you could buy them for your flat screen TVs. You could for any type of furniture, you could buy a kit for that to make sure it doesn't fall over when the earthquake actually happens. There's also things like pitchers. They have these special pitcher hooks. If you just have a nail and a wire and that wire is sitting on that nail, it's going to come off in that earthquake. But if you buy these type of hooks, which actually trap the wire inside, the pitcher is going to stay on the wall. And as I mentioned in Northridge earthquake, there were so many injuries to feet because people were running in the middle of the night to get to their children, and a lot of it were just pitchers that fell off the wall and the glass breaking. And this, you could prevent that just by literally a $5 investment in some of these special hooks.
Yeah, that's right. And Ed, I feel obliged to say, you hear a lot about earthquake prediction. We'd love to hear what's coming tomorrow or next week and have a chance to prepare. But seismologists have been working long and hard, and we're not getting very far in predicting earthquakes. So, for example, there's not typical earthquake weather. There's not a typical earthquake time of year. The animals don't do anything particular before earthquakes that's helpful. The solar flares are unrelated to when earthquakes are going to come. So I just have to say that although we're working on it, the first warning we generally have of earthquakes is when the ground starts to break.
Right. So there's a few other things that you could do to help prepare yourself. I had mentioned that there's the straps and everything. There's also things like putty for the little knickknacks around. But also, do you know how to control your utilities in your home, whether it's gas or your power or your water? An investment in a gas shutoff wrench is a great idea. As a matter of fact, what we recommend is you place, this is a wrench that's sized specifically for your gas on the side of your house. And what you want to do is actually store it somewhere near the gas meter. You can actually put this in a plastic bag, maybe put a little WD-40 in there so it stays lubed up and doesn't get rusted, and hide it in the bushes or somewhere nearby so that you're not digging through a drawer after the lights have gone out and trying to find this to turn your gas off. And you only turn the gas off if you smell gas, by the way. There's a smell added to the gas to make sure you know there's a leak. And if there isn't a leak, you want to keep it on as a resource. And then you'll need the gas company to come out to put it back on. Other things to have to think about is food and water. Having a kit. And so there's different types of food and water that's available. This is emergency disaster food. Now, granted, this is 2,400 calories. It'll get you through one person for 3 days. But you don't have to necessarily get the disaster food. You could buy literally whatever you enjoy as long as you have the discipline to update your kit and turn it over when things expired. But if this is the way you want to go because it's good for 5 years and you don't want to think about it again, you put it in your kit. You leave it alone. The same thing with water. They have water packets good for 5 years. But you can also put the regular bottles of water. The thing is that it does expire within about a year because the plastic breaks down. So you want to make sure you turn it over.
Yeah, and I just should remind you the earthquakes are real here. We've had a long history of earthquakes in Los Angeles. The last big one on the San Andreas was 1857, so 150 years ago. It's could happen again any time, but it might not happen again for decades. There's also the major earthquake under Long Beach in 1933 that actually led to our having building codes that are appropriate for earthquake country. There's the Northridge earthquake in 1994 that a lot of people probably remember. There's the San Fernando earthquake that caused even more damage that older people remember. And we've had magnitude 7s at a distance from the city pretty often. So the earthquake threat is real, and we just don't know when the next one will be.
So the San Andreas Fault has been studied for quite some time, but the effects of that type of earthquake was studied back about 2006-07, and they came out with the shakeout scenario. This was research-based, and I know that what came out of that is we know our water system, our gas, and our electrical all crossed the San Andreas Fault somewhere out there in the desert. So when this earthquake happens, the research shows that we're going to possibly be cut off from these utilities for quite some time.
Yeah, that scenario led to a lot of improvements in our systems because it was so alarming, and that was generated here at USC. The computer simulation that was done, and it was done with the Earthquake Center. So USC was in the middle of that.
Yeah, and so much has been done since the 2008 when that came out to improve our infrastructure and to train people on what to do in case of an earthquake. But the bottom line is we all have to take our own responsibility to get prepared and not depend on others. And so part of that is to make sure you have the things that you need for your family. There's some time ago we used to say I have a 72-hour kit and supplies, but now we're talking anywhere between 1 to 2 weeks, because that's how long it may take before we get any kind of help from the outside, especially if an earthquake that affects multiple counties at the same time. So when we talk about food and water and other things, think about your family, how many people you have in your family. Consider 1 to 2 gallons per person per day for water. But not just the food and water. Think about medications that you may not be able to get your hands on because your local pharmacy isn't getting the supplies in that they normally need. Think about the first aid supplies. Think about if you have babies or small children and what their dietary needs are. And then think about your pets too and what their needs are as well. All the members of the family we need to think about.
Yeah, that's right. And in terms of the research people are currently working on, people are getting increasingly concerned about the interconnectedness of the different disasters. Because an earthquake does lead to landslides. It can lead to fires. Earthquakes can lead to tsunamis, not here in California, but in other places. And we just need to be prepared for a wide range of hardship when there's a big earthquake in our area.
When we talk about preparedness, we talk about have a plan, have a kit, and to secure your home, like we already talked about. And so when we talk about having a plan, we're talking about a family plan, a communication plan. Think about having an out-of-state phone contact. The purpose behind that is you might be able to get a phone call out and call a relative, let's say in New York, but you may not be able to call right across the street because the phone lines are down. Think about your cell phones. You rely so much on your cell phone, you have your phone book in there, but what if your battery dies and you can't charge it because the power's out? You know, what do you do then? I always recommend taking the top 10 or 12 phone numbers that you need, write it on the back of your business card, put that in your wallet. That way if you borrow someone else's phone, at least you have the phone numbers, because you might not have memorized it because we're so used to asking the phone to dial mom or dad or whoever we need to.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, I just put some basic science in this discussion. You know, we're getting ever better ways to look at the earthquakes and their effects and how the ground's moving to build up to the earthquakes. You know, one of the new methods we have, well, the satellites are giving us a point-by-point measurement of how the grounds are moving. We're having new methods that use fiber optic cables, we call dark optic cables, that are not being used, where we can actually turn those into seismometers that measure the ground motion every few meters, thousands of measurements across Pasadena, for example. It's a place this has been implemented. And we're trying to figure out how to watch the seafloor in more detail as well to get the full picture of the San Andreas Fault system. So it's actually an exciting time in earthquake science.
When the earthquake happens, we know we usually only just have one. We come as a package there, and in the Ridgecrest situation, the sequence of the earthquakes, there's many aftershocks, not just in the first 24 hours, but literally to this day, there are aftershocks that are occurring out there. So talk a little bit about kind of what we could expect. I know that typically you don't know if a shock is a foreshock or an aftershock until you've had several. Can you talk about
that's right. I mean, earthquakes do come in sequences, and you know, we hear about foreshocks, the little events before a big event, but those are pretty rare. I mean, it turns out about half of the big events have a little event beforehand, but with the little events, we don't know if they're foreshocks or not till something happens. So those are fairly useless. But once there's a big earthquake, the aftershocks are fairly predictable. If we have a magnitude 7 earthquake, on average we'll have a magnitude 6 aftershock and 10 5s and 100 4s. And so once there's an event like that, 7 in Eastern California, we know we're in for an aftershock sequence. We don't know exactly where, but that area around the big earthquake is going to have subsequent earthquakes. And that's important to remember when you're in a big earthquake, that you don't want to do anything that shaking is going to endanger you by. So aftershocks are just inevitable.
So that's where that plan really comes into play, because if you have the communication plan with your family and you know where you're going to go in case you're not at home or at work, and then it brings everyone's stress level down if you could communicate with one another. And certainly if you don't have the ability to make a phone call, text messaging may work better than actually making voice calls. But also, we always tell our students, I tell them to update their social media, update their Twitter or their Facebook, so that they understand, at least the family might know, okay, they're okay. That's really critical. The other thing is for anybody who might commute using the trains or the buses, is you need to have an alternate plan, because those may not be operating right after an earthquake. The trains will stop. They have to check the tracks. There could be landslides around where the tracks are, about the hillside. Buses are used for emergency and disaster response. So what is your plan? Think about what your plan is wherever you work, and if you have children, what's your school's plan? Every school district does something a little different. So are they going to shelter your children? Do they have the food and the water and everything that they need? These are great questions to ask of your schools and your families and your employers.
Yeah, much easier to figure out beforehand than once the earthquake hits. And I should just say, the aftershocks, you know, once they're aftershocks, they only gradually decay with time. You know, they can last for years. The bad aftershocks will usually fade after a week or two, but you know, we're still seeing aftershocks occasionally from some of the bigger events in the last few decades.
Great. So we have a question about the emergency supplies and actually how you store emergency supplies. And there's several ways. If you have the space, one suggestion is to purchase a plastic trash can on wheels. You put the stuff that you don't need right away on the bottom. That would be your food, for example. On the top, you put what you need the quickest, which would be your first aid supplies, and then everything else in between. Now, what you need to do when you put that supplies in there is to write a inventory list and put down expiration dates, because it's really important that you put it in your phone as a reminder to go back in there and turn over your food or your water or medications or whatever it is that might expire. And then you could go ahead and seal that up and put it in your garage or a shed. But if you don't have that type of space, a simple duffel bag or backpack will do. And keep in mind, you have supplies at home, but also consider supplies for your office at work or at school, and then also think about your car. Because you might be commuting at the time. You might be wearing dress shoes and wish you had a pair of tennis shoes now that the earthquakes happened. So think about those types of things. And one of the resources where you could find out what type of stuff should I put in the kit is to go to shakeout.org. That's shakeout.org. And there's a lot of different resources on that website.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, have you been in major earthquakes?
I went through the Northridge earthquake, and when I went through the Northridge earthquake, actually at the time I was working for the Red Cross, so not only did I experience it, but I also responded to it. And it was, you know, once you go through an earthquake and the whole sequence of aftershocks and everything, you really, if you haven't already prepared, you start preparing. But that's not the time to start preparing. The time is now. Be prepared now so that, and make sure you sit down with your family and have a plan. And that's one of the things about the shakeout. So this Thursday is the Great Shakeout. And the Great Shakeout started in 2008, so we're on our 12th annual exercise here. And so it started in Southern California, and then it grew to the whole state a year later, and now it's International Shakeout Day. So schools, private industry, public locations, nonprofits across the country are participating on October 17th. So on 10/17, at 10/17, we're asking everyone, no matter where you are, to practice drop, cover, and hold on to simulate a 30-second earthquake. And the hope is that if your children are at school doing this and you're at work and wherever you may be and you come home later that night, that everyone's talking about what they did that day, and hopefully the discussions around earthquake preparedness and family planning.
Yeah, very good.
So we have another question. How do I know if my building is okay? Well, it really depends. You know, certainly if you're a private home or wherever you might be, the good idea is, first of all, stay inside, ride out the earthquake, and then afterwards, check your immediate area, check for injuries, check for damage. Go outside and walk the perimeter of your home to check for any kind of damage, smell of gas, electrical problems, fires, or smoke. Here at USC, we have a very extensive all-hazard emergency response plan. And part of that response plan includes damage assessments. So we have special teams that are trained that will actually check every single building throughout the university and check for damage. And if it's necessary, we'll close that building. And if it's safe, then we'll keep it open. That's how we do it here at USC. And if you work somewhere else, it's really important that you become familiar with how they respond to emergencies at your facility. All right.
Okay, yeah, let's see. And I see a question about early warning systems in other countries, and that's a great question. You know, we now know how to build early warning systems, and it's feasible. And a number of countries have. You know, Japan has had an early warning system for more than 10 years, partly because their country is built on 10 different subduction zones, and half the country is vulnerable. So they have a very well built early warning system. Warning systems are being built in Taiwan and Korea. Israel's looking into building one. And you know, the key is to have countries with some technological development and with an exposure to earthquakes. We like to tell legislators when they're considering early warning that Tibet is building an early warning system, even though it doesn't have nearly the advanced technology we have in this country. So it's just a matter of time, a year or two, before these early warning systems are well tuned and providing us with warnings when we need them.
So we have a question about how long will we be without water and power? And back when the shakeout scenario was created, the research shows that we could possibly be out with water and power for weeks. It could be weeks. And it really depends on where you live, and it also depends on if there's damage out in the infrastructure in those systems. A lot has been done to try to fix those systems and make sure they're stronger and more reliable. But your planning should be around not having the water and the power for several weeks. So that means when it comes to power, is having emergency lighting. Do you have flashlights? Do you have the fresh batteries to replace when the batteries die? Do you check your batteries? The best time to check your kit, check your batteries and your flashlights and all that is every time we change the clock. So during daylight savings, basically those 2 times a year where you stop, take some time to check your kit and make sure the batteries are fresh. A good idea is to take a pair of tennis shoes, put it under your bed, so in the middle of the night you don't have to get the cut feet, and you put those shoes on, but put a flashlight in your shoe so you can take the flashlight out, put it on, put your shoes on, and you're ready to go. There's other options too when it comes to power, is having a generator, and so for your own personal home is consideration of having a portable generator. Of course you may need fuel, but there's solar options as well. You don't even need fuel. It's just the power of the sun, and even if it's to just run your refrigerator and some lights and charge your phones, you don't need anything big. Or you could talk to an electrician about actually wiring your home so that you could hook up the generator from outside to power your home. So there's a lot of different options there. When it comes to gas, you could get an emergency gas shutoff valve on your home. You do need a plumber to do that. That's who you'd call to do that. And I know that at USC we have those on our buildings. So if it reaches a certain magnitude of shaking, then it shuts off the gas. We avoid any kind of emergencies. So these are things that you can do. And then when it comes to water, we talked about having the emergency water on hand. And even if the water is flowing out of your sinks or out of the tap, you still want to drink bottled water, packaged water, because all the sediment that might be sitting in the pipes becomes loose and it goes into the water system. And so you really have to clean that water before you drink it. Now let's say you don't have that water handy. You could boil water. You could boil water for about 10 minutes. You could also add a 1/4 cup of bleach to a gallon of water and stir it, and then you could use that, because it's not just drinking, it's sanitation and first aid as well.
Right, and let's see, I see a question, what's next in research? And first I want to just answer a question people often ask, which is, how concerned should we be if there's a big earthquake that's in the news elsewhere around the Pacific? For example, if there's a magnitude 9 earthquake in Japan, people worry all around the Pacific Rim, but the fact is big earthquakes only affect the area immediately around them. So an earthquake in Alaska or in the Northwest or in Japan, Indonesia, doesn't affect the danger here in Los Angeles. So you really only need to worry about enhanced aftershocks if there's a big earthquake in your region. She was asking what's new with research, and one of the things I've been looking at is where the inner core is turning. It's no relevance to public safety, but it's sort of interesting that the center of the Earth is a 1,000-mile ball of solid iron, and we can't really tell if it's held still or if it's moving. And we think it's moving a couple of miles a year, but that's one of the kind of more fun projects in seismology that's not related to dangerous hazards like we're talking about mainly today. We also try to look at the fault zones and see how they get damaged in earthquakes and how they heal with time after earthquakes. That gives us a better view of how fault systems work. But there's actually lots of projects. The appeal of geology is that we have so many projects, some of which are very helpful to the public, some of which are just basically interesting. A lot of them are both.
All right, so the question is, how will government get information out with no TV? Well, there are emergency mass notification systems that are available now that we didn't have many years ago. And so the government, or at least LA County and LA City, have mass notification systems that you could sign up for so that you could get text messages. Certainly the internet, if you're able to get on the internet, is to look at the websites for the city and the county. And then there are emergency notification systems like through your phone where we can notify everyone in the state if we need to at one time. At private organizations like USC, we have mass notification system called Trojans Alert, and we would update people on that as well, but we'd also use our website to broadcast out where you can get help and what's going on at the university and what's the status of classes. And we back that server up in another state so that if things go down in Los Angeles, that at least people can still access the information and be in continuous communication.
Well, very good. I think we're running short on time here.
Yeah, so a few things we want to close with. First of all is the Shakeout. And remember that that's this Thursday on 10/17 at 10/17. Great resources, shakeout.org. Another resource, if you're affiliated with USC, is called fsep.usc.edu. So it's fsep.usc.edu, which stands for Fire Safety and Emergency Planning. And on that website, we have all of our internal USC emergency procedures. There's also a drop-down menu there where you'll find for the Shakeout. So even if you're conducting the Shakeout in another organizations besides USC, you'll find all of our instructions on how to conduct the drill and other recommendations to make sure that you can do this. And it could be something as simple as the drop, cover, and hold. It could just be pushing out earthquake preparedness information. But most importantly, we've spent about 30 minutes here today, and it's really, really important that you take action. So whether it's putting those shoes on the side of your bed, or it's going out to buy an emergency kit, or it's updating your water, or it's talking to your family about that out-of-state phone contact, whatever the case may be, take some type of action so that you are better prepared. And even if you do a little bit at a time, it's great. Well, on behalf of John and myself, I want to thank you for joining us from Studio A. We'd like to thank the USC Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism for hosting us today. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and visit us at podcast.usc.edu.